Look like a few people are here, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Montrell Carmouche. I'm the director of the Safety and Freedom Fund, a program of Operation Restoration. I'm also an Ed Trust Justice Fellow, and that was an amazing conversation. The piece I was able to catch of it, I was having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I wanted to just open the floor up to Stan to see if he would like to have any additional comments about how hiring, and maybe give people an opportunity if they had some other questions.
It doesn't look like he's here yet.
Well, we definitely can't start without the man of the hour, so we'll have to wait a minute on Stan until he gets here.
If
But
you
if
could,
anybody had some thoughts that they want to share, I'm sure that we're more than open just for a conversation.
any immediate reflections from that workshop?
Can we check and see if Stan is able to get in?
Yeah, I sent a message.
I think if I had to like have any immediate reflections about the workshop, I could definitely speak to like an experience that some of us are even having right now in the middle of this workshop about hiring practices and programs and the need for STEM scopes and educations inside of prison. It just speaks to it in itself. I've never used this visible platform before, and I had difficulties longer on, right? But if these things were presented to folks while they were inside of institutions and they were given a lot more computer skills and STEM access, I don't even think that things like this, simple things like this, that's probably easy to folks like Ray, would be a barrier for folks like me. So if anything stands out, just the workshop in itself, that these conversations needs to happen, is definitely relevant today.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, no.
Hey, hey everyone. It's good to see so many familiar faces on the call. I think that if there's one thing that I kind of took away um, from the presentation, and both of them were just incredible and excellent. But I think that the thing, and maybe this is just kind of based on my kind of my personal experience right this very second, kind of being currently on the job market trying to find positions in higher ed. I think that it's very interesting. It's interesting that this is all connected, right? So there's the work that's being done kind of on Ban the Box in higher education. There's kind of the work that's been being done to around like occupational licenses, and then kind of the work that's being done for hiring practices as well. And what I'm finding amazing is that there are at different places across the country, depending on the state that you're applying in, it seems like there's just a real kind of unorganized system of whether people ask about your criminal history. And I really I think kind of having been in Washington, which was a ban the box state, and then most of the postdocs that I applied to didn't require a background check, but now I'm basically kind of being confronted with all of these positions that there absolutely is this background check. So and more so kind of in states that kind of around the South. And so kind of just understanding that all of these things are connected, and just because we're kind of making headway in one area and in one part of the country just doesn't mean that there's so much work to do in other areas, whether that's different parts of the higher education like hiring stream, and then different parts of the country that kind of have different climates for all of this work as well. So anyways, that was definitely something that I took away.
If I could just add to Noel's comments, I think those are super great points. I think in different places, we are in different progress points. And actually, sorry, I think Dr. Andrisse is able to come back in, so I'll actually stop.
Hey, everyone. Am I a few minutes behind?
Hi, Stan. Happy you could join us. Yeah, you're a few minutes behind, but better late than never. We're here. We opened up a little bit, and we just wanted to give you an opportunity if you had any additional comments on hiring, and then open it up for questions if anybody else had some questions that they wanted to ask.
So, I mean, I'll jump into the answering the questions part. I don't know, since I'm kind of following. So just comments on hiring, you said?
You can pretty much speak to, anything you wanted to, but just if you had any additional comments on hiring and practices of hiring and things that you think should be put in place.
Yeah, I mean, just as I mentioned in the session just a second ago, I mean, we really need to be part of the leadership of these programs, we meaning formerly incarcerated folks. And, when ads for hiring go out, it should be a very targeted approach to trying to fill that with a, formerly incarcerated, directly impacted person. And there's certainly ways of how to do that, but one of the most striking things is the numbers of the people that are running these programs of higher education inside prison spaces. Is overwhelmingly white women, and whereas people incarcerated are overwhelmingly people of color. Like it just needs to be addressed. That's one of the. I mean, I could stop there and just kind of add to question is, but that's one of the big striking things to me, and there's certainly tangible things that we could do to address that.
Do you have any thoughts around if hiring practice for formerly incarcerated folks should be different? Whereas, it's my belief that your growth kind of stops at incarceration. You don't grow at the same rate that people do that are living outside in society. So do you think the hiring practice should be different, or different things should be put in place for formerly incarcerated folks when they're being hired on these jobs and trained to be in these spaces?
Yeah, and the rubric just needs to be, the hiring rubric needs to be reassessed. And it's the kind of same thing in academia and looking to reassess the hiring rubric for faculty positions to try to get more Black individuals and women into those positions, to where, you know, the rubric needs to be adjusted to where it encompasses, you know, even if the person may not have equal amount of education per se, where it encompasses life experiences, as, you know, somehow to encompass the leadership that they had in prison, or leadership even in street gang affiliation, like the organizational skills that they pull from those activities. I think, you know, to say that they have no skills in leadership because they haven't been hired by some company or institution of higher education where they've been a leader their entire life. You know, how do you incorporate those types of things into the hiring rubric to make it, you know, to put people on a more even playing field when you're trying to weigh them against someone who doesn't have prison experience? So, you know, it needs to be redesigned. The rubric needs to be redesigned.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Did anybody else have any more questions that they wanted to ask?
Do you have examples of companies, organizations like that are doing it right in terms of hiring practices and kind of what that application process can look like in a good example?
Yeah, there's I mean, there are a number of organizations that are, you know, have encompassed and incorporated hiring people who've been incarcerated. You know, our organization is one of them. We kind of teach that. You know, we do sessions on how to do that, but the Fortune Society also is an organization that has done a lot of work around hiring. You look at the people on their team, and you can see the number of people who've been through the system on their team. They've developed a system to, you know, how to successfully hire people who've been through the system. I mean, organizations like Sarita and Operation Restoration, you know, again, our organization, Just Leadership. These are nonprofits and not necessarily institutions of higher education. I mean, there are some that are doing better than others, but I really can't, you know, there's some that are doing better than others, but all of them, I think, have much room for improvement in putting formerly incarcerated people at the leadership role, at the helm of kind of you know, decision making and resource and obtaining resources.
Has it been your experience then, like folks want to hire formerly incarcerated folks or put formerly incarcerated folks in these kind of spaces, right? But then they want the tokenism, right? They want my face to lead the project, but they want my words to be, I'm a puppet behind the scenes. So you tell me what to say, you tell me what to do, you tell me what questions to ask. Like, what does that look like about change for us? Like, where do we start with that? Like, you put me in the
space, that's huge.
You know,
yeah, I was just no, I was just on a session with Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and the dean was, you know, coordinating this talk where we brought some folks from our team to talk about it and how we approach it. And we stressed this idea of academics are very good at not just formerly incarcerated people, but just community and gathering information from people, the community, formerly incarcerated, and then packaging those ideas and solutions into grant submittable wording and getting millions of dollars off of the ideas and solutions that the community thought up and the community and formerly incarcerated people really came up with. But they don't necessarily, the grant making system and the way to obtain resources is biased towards, people with education, higher educational backgrounds, biased towards white individuals, and thus, regular community member with the great idea can't necessarily doesn't necessarily have the means to put together the wording the way that these funding agencies want it. And what I've also found is like the funding agencies don't trust the individual. The idea is great, but you can't possibly do that. You're like just you barely have any high school. Like, how could you possibly lead $1 million program? Like, I've been leading $1 million programs since I was 12, 13. Like, what do you mean? How do I lead $1 million program? But, that is the way that they think. It's a great idea, but you know what? We're going to partner you with somebody from Johns Hopkins. They're really good at like the budgeting and the admin stuff. So, we'll just take your idea and give you $1,000 for your helping out with the committee. And it's $1 million grant. So that is predatory, basically. And it's kind of the academic way to gather that, I'm just gathering survey data and, gathering it from the community, but then putting it into something that gives you a bunch of money, credibility, accolades, while the people that came up with it, never get any representation of coming up with that idea. How do we solve that is challenging, but we have some ideas, I should say, but I would, love to hear what others are thinking on that.
I will just say a thought I have on this that you started to touch on in terms of so often when it comes to opening hiring processes and access to formerly incarcerated individuals and even the banning the box movements, it's so often connected to additional funding or grants and not just done because it needs to be done and opened up. I do think some of what helped in the ban the box movement around employment and hiring is like commitment pledges and things like that from corporations, outside of, monetary support that they're getting. But to me, that's like the huge issue is not monetizing the process. And people, again, who've already been part of a system that's profiting off of them anyways.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick, Stan. I am, so I mentioned right before you came on that, I'm kind of in the midst of the academic job search right this very second. And what I'm finding, and maybe you can comment on a little bit, is that, even even states that have ban the box bills, right? Probably the ones that should be the employers that should be taking the lead on this are actually excluded. I mean, it's the universities and colleges that are actually excluded from some of these. They have exclusions to not be included in as an employer that has to follow these ban the box legislations, at least for employment. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts. Like, how do we because that's just a real simple thing. I think, again, this should just be, I mean, if you have a ban the box bill in your state for college admission, it should be kind of a no-brainer that the colleges should have to follow that as well. But what I'm finding is pretty much everywhere I'm applying to has requirement that you have to go through some kind of either check the box, or it's definitely noted at some point you're going to have to go through a process to hopefully that's not me. You're going to have to go through a process at some point to disclose your background. So yeah, I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts on that aspect of things.
Oh, I think someone accidentally muted me. My bad. I was stepping away, but had my mic on. So sorry, I was making some noise in the background. But Noel, are you speaking to places of higher education?
Yeah. How do we make this encompassing, right? I mean, it's great that we have this hodgepodge of like ban the box bills in higher education here, ban the box in housing here, ban the box in occupational licensing here, and then ban the box in employment here. But then, like I say, I'm finding out that, schools as employers in most of the states that I'm applying to are actually, they don't have to follow the law. They are one of the employers that are actually, they just don't have to do it in most of these states. And so I'm trying to think of like, how do we make this more encompassing? I know that we've done a lot of work on ban the box in higher education, but how do we make it so that it's ban the box kind of across the board, so that it's kind of, no matter where you're at in this process, it's something that is, championed, even on like hiring pages, right? Just this idea that most of the schools that I'm applying to don't even say, hey, you're not, it's not like you're not going to be excluded no matter what. It just is, it's just that, it's just a weird policies across the country. And so I'm just kind of curious if you have thoughts on how do we make this more like encompassing across all of these organizations at every level.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, I think. It's, there's so much autonomy given to kind of hiring. And I think, that is, you're absolutely correct. Some of the ban the box on hiring is not quite, a lot of academic institutions don't quite, are private. So in many of the states, it's like government entities and things of that nature. So there's, I don't know the answer
schools,
to that.
Yeah, even state schools too. I just applied at University of South Carolina, and I mean it is not just intrusive what they ask. It's outright ridiculous what they ask you to the hoops they ask you to jump through, and the explanations they expect you to give. So yeah, I mean it's even state schools too. It's not just private schools.
I mean, policy is one thing that I could think of, but really, I think the other approach that really needs to be done, and Noel, you and I have talked about this through Unlock Higher Ed. I mean, there needs to be more consulting done. We need to move into the space as formerly incarcerated experts. We need to move into this like consulting space to really provide guidance, like to work to, connect with institutions, universities, if they're still going to ask these questions, recommend that they connect with an organization that is, has expertise in assessing the, backgrounds of individuals. Aside from, a lot of these places, they're like, we have an ex-law enforcement, we have an ex-cop that comes, at Hopkins, they told me they have a former Baltimore City police person that helps them in assessing their, that question. It's like, you have a former police officer from Baltimore City helping you determine whether the conviction is something that is backwards. We should be part of that. If you're going to ask it, I think, working to have policies to remove it altogether. But if you're going to ask it, I think we need to step up and move into that space of providing our expertise. But the challenge is, it's like, you're formerly incarcerated and I am Stanford. Why would I come and take consulting advice from you? So, but I think there's multiple angles. I don't have the of great answer really to that.
Well, thank you, everyone. I can't believe we already hit our half-hour mark for the breakout sessions. The next workshop starts at 4:10, so folks can feel free to head back to the agenda and click in there. But I do want to give us one last moment for any last thoughts, closing comments. And thank you so much, Stan and Montrell, for keeping us moving in this conversation.
Thank you for everyone that participated. I don't know if you did rounds of introductions with folks, but appreciate you all being part of the conversation here.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you back at the second workshop.